Hello, I am Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and today I am joined by special guest Zoe to talk about competitive, non-team, non-partner games that have the potential for multiple winners. Zoe, do you want to introduce yourself and let people know who you are?
Yeah, sure. I'm Zoe, and I'm a game designer, and yeah, that's me.
So I must admit, I didn't know much about Zoe until I saw a really, really interesting video recently that is about many different subjects. But one of the key subjects that you talked about in this video was about games with multiple winners and why there aren't more games with multiple winners. And that it really got me thinking. I've been thinking about it ever since you posted that video. It really was a great food for thought video, and I'll have a link to it in the description of this video below. But I wanted to see what, in short, I know people can go watch that full video, but in short, what started to get you thinking? Probably a couple of years ago, I'm guessing, not right when you filmed that video, but started to think about games with multiple winners.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not something that was like consciously on my mind, but my first games have always been about having multiple winners. Like my first, I guess I just always saw it as kind of odd that it always had to be about who had the most points or who got there first or things like that. And so I just sort of organically fell into this design pattern of making multi-victor games. And then as I started reading books like Games Agency as Art and reading like Engines of Anxiety and things like that, it just started becoming, I started being able to put words to it. And then once I was able to put words to it, I made that video.
Well, it was a really fascinating video that I would highly recommend to anyone who wants to start thinking about this a little bit. And one of the things, we won't really go into this in the games that we're going to talk about today, but one of the things I think that came up in the video that I was thinking about a little bit is the idea of intrinsic rewards and intrinsic victories in games. Like if I build something really cool in a game, even if I don't have the most victory points, that can feel like a win. But today we're talking about games where you actually, in terms of what the game is telling you a winner is, that there can actually be multiple winners. Do you think that's a key difference between the two?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of games that sort of allow this expression through gameplay, but doesn't exactly reward it. And so you end up having this dichotomy of like, well, I want to make like a very fun, expressive engine, but at the same time, I need to generate enough points to win or have more points than the other player that's building like the optimal engine. And so your actions are always like underpinned by the game telling you like that's cool, but it's not exactly the right thing to do.
Yeah, I don't think most games don't do it directly, but it's almost a little patronizing to be like, oh, that's neat that you made that cool thing, but it doesn't matter. You didn't have as many points as the other players.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you've designed some games in this format. Before we jump into our list today, is there any? You mentioned the game Bread to me. Can you tell us a little bit about Bread?
Yeah. Bread is a game where the players are these key figures that are building infrastructure to make sure that their people don't starve. Mm-hmm. And it's a game where multiple players could win, provided they build enough bread to quell all the unrest in their like little like tableau. And so players are either building or gathering, and these actions are incredibly open-ended. So you could like build to other players, or you could gather from the deck or steal from another player. And so this is a game where like the optimal strategy is to like collaborate and work together, because if you're efficient, there's enough bread for everybody. But a lot of players, they have like this tragedy of commons, like first instinct to just sort of isolate and like hoard and be greedy, and that leads to situations where there's not enough bread for everyone, and then suddenly people have to make decisions about who's going to survive.
I love the prisoner's dilemma in general, and so I'm fascinated by this game. I need to play this game because it sounds like there's a little bit of that element of, you know, we could optimize together, and many of us could win or not, or we can hoard that bread.
Yeah. I love games that play with that space.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some games in that space today. So I have an initial list of games that we're not going to discuss in detail, but here's a list of some games that touch upon this category a little bit. And again, I'll say to anyone who's maybe joining a little bit later in the video, We're not talking about cooperative games today. We're talking about competitive games that are not team games and not partner games, but still have the potential for multiple winners. And so some of the games on this list are Ankh, Bread, as Zoe just mentioned, Blood on the Clocktower, Dealt, Dune or Rex, 2 different versions of the same game, Elevenses, Get Bit, Mind Management, Munchkin, My Little Scythe. I have 2 games on this list from Stonemaier Games, My Little Scythe and Charterstone. I don't think this counts all that much, but these are games where where you can tie and there's no tiebreaker. It just says if you tie, multiple players win. So probably on the edge a little bit here of this category. Root has some endgame conditions where multiple players can win. Salem, Shikoku, Stationfall, which I've really been wanting to play, but I haven't played that yet. Nanatoridori, and That's Not a Hat. That's Not a Hat was actually on my list, but I haven't played it in a while. And as I refresh myself on the rules, it does have a clear condition where the player with the fewest cards is the winner, but I think multiple players can have the fewest cards. I don't know. That seems a little bit on the border for this category for me.
Yeah. There's a lot of games that are like really close or they're like on the border. I feel like I would like to see more games that are like, if you're tied, share the victory, because why not?
Right. Why not? Exactly. Yeah. I absolutely relate to that, because there are some games, especially even with tiebreakers, where you go a few levels deep into the tiebreaker and there's no other way to do it. Like at that point, you're just rolling a die or just let multiple people win, which I think is great.
Yeah.
So in the spirit of today's video, Zoe had the idea that we're not going to rank these games. We're just going to talk about 5 games. There's no clear winner here, just 5 games that we really enjoy that can have the potential for multiple victors. So what is one of the games for you that you'd like to talk about today?
The first one I wanted to talk about was Galaxy Trucker. And I feel like a lot of people don't usually think of Galaxy Trucker as a multi-victor game because it does have like victory points, like the credits that you're trying to make in order to win. But like if you look in the rules, it pretty much says that you win if you make money. So as long as you don't have a negative score, like you manage to make a spaceship and you manage to at least deliver some cargo and get to the end without losing too many parts, then you win. And it does have the caveat that if you make the most credits, you win a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So it is a little bit underpinned by that. But I do like that it at least experiments with it. And it shows like a simple way of taking like this really traditional format and turning it into a multi-victor game by just changing it into a threshold of success and still letting people like be competitive if they want. And I feel like it's very thematic and appropriate for a game that's essentially about capitalism in a sense, like just making the most money.
Right. On the way you saying that made me think that there's kind of an adjacent category of games where you mentioned the word threshold, where there's a threshold that you either have to reach to be eligible for the win, or a threshold where you are cut out of the potential of winning. High Society, I think, is one of these games where I think if you have maybe the least money or the few, do you remember least or most? It's one of the 2.
Yeah, I think it's the least money. Like if you spend, you have to have at least, you can't be the poorest, I think, at the end.
Right, you can't be the poorest. There is, I think, a clear winner in that game, but it's a little bit adjacent to this because I think most of those players feel like they kind of won a little bit if they weren't that player with the least money in that instance. And you mentioned that with negative money in Galaxy Trucker.
Yeah. And also this game is also just really fun. I like the real-time building aspect at the beginning.
Yeah. I played very recently, I played Fit to Print, which I haven't played Galaxy Trucker in a long time, but a few people said it reminded them a little bit of Galaxy Trucker. Have you played that one?
I have not. I have not played that one.
You're instead of building a ship, you're building a newspaper in real time. You're grabbing articles and flipping them over and trying to put them together. Yeah.
Well, that sounds cool. I like that.
Yeah. So this is Galaxy Trucker, as Zoe's first game to mention. My first game, which one will I start with? I'll start with actually another space-themed one. So Cosmic Encounter. Admittedly, it's been a little while since I played Cosmic Encounter, but I've enjoyed my plays of it. I especially enjoy it with people who really know the game very well. But this is a game where you are basically on your turn, you were trying to attack someone or a different planet. someone's other planet, and you're inviting other people to join you in that attack, and they can either join you in that attack or they can join the defending player. And so there's very little downtime as a result of this. Most everyone is participating in most turns of the game, and you're not set in these allegiances. These aren't teams that you're forming. It's a little bit more temporary, and the end result is multiple players can actually win the game. It's even in the description of the game. It's a selling point for the game, which I thought was really cool, and why I thought it should fit into this category. There's the potential for multiple people to win. Again, I haven't played this in a long time, so I need to get it back to the table. Have you played this one at all or recently?
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. I quite like how the different alien factions like really change up the gameplay, and I do like how two players could win together by negotiating. It creates like a very tense situation where like one player could just betray the other one and not play the negotiation card and just win by themselves, but could work together and win together. And I like that. I feel, to me, this falls into the category of like a shared like tie, like victory, because it's like getting to 5 colonies at the same time. And so the journey to getting 5 colonies is still sort of zero sum, but still, I like that it has tools for sharing victory.
Yeah, there's that zero sum element of it. That's true. And we'll encounter that, I think, a little bit later on the list as well with another game.
Oh yeah. I still love this game. I think there's space for games that are about like zero sum conflict, and I think this one, and also this one, just has a lot of fun stuff going on with it.
Yeah. Well, I need to play this one again. Cosmic Encounter on my list here. What's another game you wanted to talk about today?
Another one I really like is Pax Penning, which is a game released by Matilda very recently. And it's a game where the players are like key actors during the first Christian king of Sweden's attempt at nation building. And one of the ways that the game could end is with the Thane's victory, where the king was successful, and then the person who is like the most loyal to the king, as represented as having like the most pennings, wins. But you could also form coalitions, and in that case, like a whole coalition would win. So this is kind of like in the category of like being able to form coalitions organically through the game, and then have that whole group win together. And what I really like about the coalition aspect is that it's like Root kind of has this with like the Vagabond playing like a dominance card, and but with that it's very like deterministic, like it's very clear where the allegiances are. But with this, it's like it's based on the stones that the players have. Like there are stones that are key to each player's color, and if you have more of another player's stone in your supply, and you would normally win, that player would actually win instead. Unless they have more of your stones, then it's a coalition. So there's that kind of scary trust element where it's like, I have more of another player's stones, so there's a good chance I might just lose at the end of this game. But if we work together and we trust each other, we can have a coalition, and I like that a lot.
I like everything you've described about this. This is the one I was really curious to hear you talk about, because I don't know much about it, but I love the look of it. I love the sound of it. I'm fascinated to play this one. Yeah.
She makes incredible games. Turncoats is like my favorite game, and it's very compact and it has the same kind of look. Matilda makes amazing games.
Yeah. Cool. Well, this is the top of my list, I think, from the ones that you mentioned. I'm excited to try it. And it reminded me, actually, when you included this, Pax Penning, of another game that's probably a little bit on the border a little bit, but this is one of my favorite games. Have you played The King's Dilemma by any chance?
I've heard a lot about this, but I've not had the privilege of trying it. It's on my list of games to try.
It's one of my all-time favorite campaign games for various reasons. And there, at the very end of the campaign, there is a winner, but there's so much story and nuance that leads up to that point. In our group, that was almost entirely irrelevant who won the campaign. Rather, it was along the way in this game. It's a game about voting on choices. Basically, a turn of the game is that you reveal a card, and that card says, It'll say something like you can decide to feed the people wheat, or you can decide to feed the people cicadas. We have a lot of cicadas in the Midwest right now. So decide one of these two things to do and vote on it and decide what to do. And based on your individual factions or just who we are as people at the table, we would vote to decide what was important to us, and we can bribe people or influence the vote. And a decision is made, and that often impacts the entire future of the campaign in ways that we don't realize. But in that moment, it often means that we unlock a certain pack of cards and shuffle those cards into the event deck, and we'll be drawing from those cards on the next turn. So it's a game about voting and decisions as you're steering this kingdom competitively. So you're working together to steer kingdom, but you're competing against one another. And yet at the end of any individual game of the King's Dilemma, the idea of there even being a winner is, I used the word irrelevant earlier, but it's almost even less than irrelevant for each individual session of the game. It's just, these are the things that happened in the game, and maybe you moved yourself as an advisor a little bit forward in the kingdom, or maybe you didn't. And I don't know if it even quite counts for this category, but it's one of those games where winning felt so irrelevant, and yet it was a competitive experience that I really wanted to mention on this list. And I would highly recommend it if you get the chance to play it.
I'm really glad you did, because I wanted to include some legacy games too, but I was like, that's not technically multi-winner. But like when there's like elements to the game that are like sort of meta beyond like the context of like the individual games, I feel like it does add that sort of motivations that run counter towards just domination. Suddenly you're motivated to just like see more content and explore the game. And so I think that's a fun way of adding like layered motivations to players. So yeah, that's awesome. I'm really glad to check this out.
I think layered motivations is an amazing description for this game. Yeah, there's so many different layers of motivations to this game. So yeah, The King's Dilemma, one of my favorite games. I'm really excited about the sequel to Queen's Dilemma, which will come out, I think, later this year.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I was like thinking of like Oath, because like even though that game has like a strict winner, it's still, you still make deals to shape like the empire from game to game. And
that's true.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. What's another game on your list? We've each mentioned two so far.
Yeah. Escape from Aliens in Outer Space is another really fun one. This one is kind of riding the line because it's sort of teams, because there's like an alien team and then there's the humans, but the humans aren't really on a team. The humans are each trying to survive by finding an escape pod before the aliens can kill them. And each escape pod only has room for like one human. So, and some of them might not even work. So there's that tension of like just trying to get to an escape pod to survive while you're being hunted by these aliens as a collective. And so it's, I really like this game. It's like a hidden movement game. So there's a lot of tension of like where people are, and you don't even know who's on whose team. So as you're playing, you're like trying to figure out who's a threat and who's just trying to survive and are still like a liability, even if they're another human. So this is a fun game. I wish I could play it more and see more of the ways you could do head games and fake outs and things like that.
This is one that I admittedly haven't played, but it sounds fascinating. It sounds like a distilled version of a game that I'll mention in a second. And I almost wish the game I'm about to mention was a little bit more distilled. So I really, really need to try this game.
Oh yeah. It's great because it's pretty approachable. There's not a whole lot of complexity to it. I think the biggest complexity is just that there's like everybody has hidden information, so there's not a lot of like oh, so that card means you do this. It's sort of like everyone has to kind of understand the rules. The rules are not that complex, but still everybody has to have a grasp of them to sort of engage on the same level.
Right. Well, this is one that I definitely need to try. I'm glad you brought up this one. And we'll have some juxtaposition here to compare it to the game that I was going to mention, which is Nemesis. So very similar in theme. You could almost, the description that you gave, you could almost apply the same thing to Nemesis, where you wake up on a spaceship. You've kind of forgotten where you are because you've probably been in cryogenic sleep for a little while. And some aliens show up on the ship. And so you're trying to escape from aliens in outer space, but in Nemesis instead. And each player has different has a different goal, but a lot of those goals overlap, and so there can be multiple winners. And there's, even though there is like a trader element to this game, there isn't always a trader, and it's one of these games where almost everything, or some of the things you do, will feel like you are being a trader because you are following your own objective or your own goal, but you're not necessarily trying to actively hurt other players in doing so. You just, your goals might not overlap, or they might overlap a little bit. Like you might be trying to steer the ship to a certain place, or steer back to Earth, or get to an escape pod. But meanwhile, you're all trying to survive. So there is a reason to help each other a little bit along the way, or even a lot along the way. What are your thoughts on Nemesis?
This is another game that's like really high on my list to try. It's from everything I've like looked at it, it's very much like a multi-victor game. It seems like it seems like it's very possible for like a lot of the conditions to sort of conflict with each other, but like it's still it really hits all the buttons for me. I'm really excited to get this one to the table sometime. But yeah, it's I have not tried it yet, so but yeah, I really like it in concept and from what I've seen of it.
I think one of them, I think you're right that like some of the goals can definitely conflict with each other. Oftentimes I would say there's at least one part of multiple goals that don't conflict. Even though the final result of the goal might conflict. Like you and I both might have a goal where we need to make sure the ship ends up going to Earth, that type of thing. So we have to work together to do that. But the other part of our goal might be quite different. And that isn't public information. So I think that works out well to have little moments of victory, even if there aren't shared victors in the end. But there is the potential for shared victors in the end too. Yeah.
And I feel like it's also like great example of like the need-based game state goals, where it's not about like doing like being the first to escape or something like that, but more about like trying to accomplish the thing that your goal card dictates to you. And I think it's fun when you don't know if they're gonna directly conflict with their players or not. I think that's kind of a fun like tension of you don't know if you're on the same page or not.
Right. That's a great part of the tension of the game. I absolutely agree. So that's Nemesis. I've only played the game Nemesis. There are other iterations, but yeah, Nemesis. What's another game on your list?
We're Doomed is a game I quite like a lot. I didn't hear about this one until you had shared it with me, so I'm really grateful for that, because this one is like probably one of my favorite multi-victor games now.
Oh, nice. Nice.
I brought it to a game night with my friends, and it's very silly. You're playing as these like world leaders, and the world's about to like explode or something, and you're trying to collectively build a rocket with enough seats for you, but only some of you are actually going to get on the ship. So players are either building resources to build the rocket ship, or to nuke another player, or they're trying to like build influence to like get those first seats. And so it has very much a lot of that prisoner's dilemma element, where you could all just build resources and directly contribute them to the rocket, but it's like you're going to notice that the technocracy like player is like amassing a lot of influence because they generate just a little bit more resources, and then you start getting nervous that like maybe they're gonna steal the seats, or like the event cards throw a lot of wrenches into things. So like in our game we almost lost because a NPC got introduced that was going to take like the first seat of the rocket, the only seat that we managed to build. So I quite like it a lot.
And like you said, like this game leads to so many memorable moments as a result of these interactions and this shared goal that you can share some seats on the ship, but not all of them. And you have the timer going the whole time. You can see it in the photo here. There's a giant timer that's just sitting there on the table counting down. Is it 15 minutes?
15 minutes.
Yeah. Which adds to the tension of that game and all this decision space too. Make sure that, and I think in some of these games you can end up over discussing things at times, and you don't have the time to do that, and we're doomed because of the timer.
Yeah. We had a card where everybody was going to sing, and like people were getting caught. What should I sing as? Like, please, we only have 15 minutes.
That's awesome. I have this on my shelf. I haven't brought it out in a little while, but this is making me want to get it back to the table to see what happens.
Yeah, a lot of my friends online admittedly were not that into it, but I decided afterwards that they were wrong. It's a good thing.
I've definitely had that experience. It seems to be a little divisive with people who really love it or people who really don't. But if you find those people who really love it, it's a pretty cool experience. I've had a good time with it. Yeah. So that is We're Doomed on Zoe's list. Let's see if I have kind of a comparison here on my last two. I'll go with Turing Machine here. This is actually very different than a lot of the games that we've discussed here. There's not as much pressure. There is a little bit of a timed element here, but this is a game about solving a puzzle, and you're trying to solve the puzzle faster than the other players. But multiple players can solve the puzzle at the exact same time, and they will share the victory of the game. Essentially, it's a deduction puzzle where you're trying to use several clues that the game is giving to you, and you're deciding which inputs to put into the game's computer, even though it isn't app-based at all. It is not app-based. You're trying to put these inputs into the computer to see, to learn information, to try to deduce better what the solution to the problem is. And like I said, it's just a shared puzzle that multiple players can figure out at the same time. Have you played this or played any other games like that where it literally is just a puzzle that you're solving together and trying to solve it more optimally than other players?
Yeah. Shoot, I'm blanking on the name of it, but I have played games where it's like a logic puzzle, and I like this one because I haven't played it, but I like how it's like made like this very interesting like mechanism out of like just cardboard. It's actually really impressive that it's able to like create these like logic puzzles just with those like cards. So I think that's pretty impressive, because like the other sort of logic puzzle games I see usually have to have like either like have like some players have like some knowledge of like each, like one person might have like one clue of it, sort of like several blind people touching like an elephant sort of thing, where like everybody has like a little piece of the puzzle and a piece of the clue, and you're trying to like get information from them that way. But this one manages to have all the information in the game itself for the puzzle. I think that's impressive. I like that.
And even though it is a puzzle in that way, there's still reasons to pay attention to other players. Like you're kind of paying attention to what they are asking about, how they're trying to solve the puzzle. It's probably less interactive than a lot of the other games that we've talked about, but there's a little bit of paying attention to other players. Yeah,
I like that. It's
so that's Go ahead. Sorry,
Oh, I was just saying that I would like to try it sometime. I'd like to see it in action.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a neat little game, and you're right that the interface of the game is really, really clever. That it does all this without an app. So that is Turing Machine as my second to last game. What's the last game that you want to talk about today?
Fog of Love.
I
really love this game. It's perhaps a little debatable if you would call it competitive, but I still put it in the multi-victor sort of category, because the players like are not necessarily going to win together. You pick these destinies over the course of your play to determine what you're like looking for out of the relationship, and it's possible that one player will fulfill their destiny while the other one doesn't, or both, or neither. And so I really like this. This game does a lot of the stuff that I talked about in my video, with like these value neutral end state goals, and giving you the option to like decide during the course of play which one you want to shoot for. And as a consequence, it has like such an interesting narrative where like you might think that you're compatible with the other player, and then you start noticing them trying to sabotage the relationship. It seems like they're trying to sabotage the relationship, and you're not sure why. Like this game is like great, and I love it. It's like it's another great example of like all the stuff I talk about. Like sometimes a trait is like a good thing, but sometimes it could be like directly opposed to the other player's trait. Like one wants it positive, they wants it like negative. Like there's so much good about it.
I love this game too. Yeah, I love the genre of movies, romantic comedies, and so I love that someone made a romantic comedy game that so wonderfully distills romantic comedies into a game of like you said, there's there's destinies that you're pursuing, but you're also there are little, I don't know, there are little twists and turns along the way. Like no matter how you try to decide, okay, this is the thing that's important to me. Little decisions along the way can change what's important to you and what you decide to value about the other player. And hopefully, by the end of the game, that you can share the victory together and have that shared win. It actually has felt weird in games of Fog of Love where we haven't shared the win, but it does lead to a story when that doesn't happen.
Yeah. There's so much like fun space for like communication and miscommunication. It's a great game.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought this one up. That's Fog of Love, a really, really special game. And my last game really is not, we've had some good comparisons here. This one doesn't compare all that well, but my game is Cockroach Poker. So Cockroach Poker is another game that I haven't played in a while, so I had to refresh myself on it a little bit. But a lot of people mention this when I ask people about what their favorite multi-victor game is. And it fits into the category of game of there is one person who loses the game and everyone else wins, but they're not winning together. You're still winning individually as you try to get one person. It's a race to get someone else to lose, basically. And you lose in this game if you end up having 4 of the same type of card in front of you. And the way that happens is generally on a turn in this game, I might pass a card to you face down, and you have to decide to either reveal it and put it in front of you and play it. And that lets you be the next player to pass a card to someone else, or to say, oh, and I have to say when I do that, I have to say, this is a cockroach, or this is a bat. And you get to decide if I'm telling the truth or not. And if you don't think I'm telling the truth, you can just pass it on to somebody else. You can keep passing these cards around the table until everyone's seen them. So it's a game of kind of consistent bluffing and limited information along the way as you try to get someone to either have 4 of the same type of card or to not have any cards in their hand. So yeah, what do you think about this category of multi-victor games where there is a distinct loser? So there's someone at the table who has lost, but all the other players get to win individually.
Yeah, I think, well, I apologize. I still find it a little bit domination based because you're like trying to eliminate a player, but like I mentioned earlier, I think there's space for games like that, and this game in particular, I think is really fun for that because when I was looking into this game, I was like, oh, this could make for some really funny like group bluff scenarios where like 3 people hand you a card that they ensure are like trust us, this is a cockroach, and then the last player is like am I going to get betrayed by all of you, or
well, and that's one thing I forgot to mention in the description, that you do have the option to peek at the card and then pass it to somebody. If you peek at it, you can't play it at that point. You've given up the option to play it, but you can peek at it. And so then you do have that information to share with other players. And like you said, you could say multiple times in a row, this is this. And all of you could be lying or none of you could be lying. You don't really know.
Yeah. It looks like a really fun game that I would like to try someday, but it's another one that I want to add to the list.
Yeah. I think the clever thing about this in terms of domination is because it has limited information and bluffing and really the option to say no. If I pass you that card, you can either call me out on it or you can peek at it. And by peeking at it, you're saying, no, I'm not taking this. I'm going to pass it on to somebody else. So it doesn't have, in that category of domination, I think it doesn't have much potential for spite, which is something that I really try to avoid in games where players can end up actually picking on a player in the game. I don't like that. And in Cockroach Poker, I don't think you can really do that, which I appreciate.
Yeah. I think that it creates like a different kind of atmosphere where it's more about like almost like conspiracy and like where there's a little bit more like I'm blanking on the words, but yeah, it's more, it feels like a more playful kind of thing where when you're just trying to eliminate like one player, it's like group domination. It's but it's different. It's different, and I think it's fun. I think it's like also another aspect of games that are not like explored as much. That I think it would be fun to see.
I'd like to see more like this too. I think I mentioned Get Bit earlier. I haven't played Get Bit, but I think that might be somewhat similar. I need to learn more about that one.
I haven't tried that one either. There's so many games that I haven't had the time to try.
A lot of games out there, yeah. But this is definitely a shared space, or a space of games that I want to explore more as a designer and as a player. So like you mentioned several games, Pax Penning, Escape from Aliens. I definitely want to play those, and a few more on this list. I want to try for the first time to see how they offer the potential for multiple winners. So I'm so thankful that you introduced this topic on your YouTube channel, and I'd highly recommend anyone watching this to check out Zoe's video and your other videos on the channel. So thank you for putting that out there to the world.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really grateful that you had me on.
Yeah. So there's a link to Zoe if you want to check out their content on about bread, about other games and games that you think about and talk about. And I'd love to hear from people who watch this. If you have a favorite game that has the potential for multiple victors, and as you saw on our list today, it doesn't always happen that you have multiple victors in this game. There's just the potential for that. Let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much, Zoe. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thanks.